We are our go.
Okay, it's this actual recording higher quality.
So
Yeah.
let's get rolling. Hi,
Yep.
everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. To our loyal listeners and viewers, um, welcome back. Please help us get the word out about this live stream to other enthusiasts and tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lee. I am the managing director at Sino-Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, a earlier than usual Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good morning. This is Lei Xing, your co-host, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 181. My dreams of owning a Chinese EV here in the U.S. just went down the drains. But before we get into the software connected vehicle ban, we should talk about the last couple of days in China. And just today, big news out of the uh, that Politburo meeting of the CPC Central Committee. And the two things that came out of that was the reduction of the RRR, the reverse repo ratio
Yep.
for financial institutions, and then that drove the stock up so much that the Shanghai Stock Exchange um, had some bug for like a couple of hours. People couldn't trade.
Yep.
Yeah, and then the day before, 9 vehicles launched on the same day, September 26th. Must be an auspicious day. Uh, and this, as we come to an end of this golden September and entering the silver October and home stretch, as you would call it, and gift. I think it's gift as China goes into this National Day 7-day holiday vacation, feeling better maybe about the economy. So we should talk a
More
little bit about that.
hopeful.
Yeah, more hopeful. Yeah.
And a couple of different things as well. David Tepper, who's one of the best traders on the street, after all this stimulus was announced by the Chinese government, he went on CNBC and he said he bought everything China. So, uh, so it seems like the Chinese government is creating this stimulus and uh, for this home stretch. And in addition to that, and this is non-government, but Tesla has extended 0% financing for
Yeah.
5 years. So they're also really trying to goose the last quarter as we get out of. So October 1st, for those new listeners, is Chinese 4th of July or National Day. And so they
Big year
celebrate
too.
that. Yeah,
75.
exactly.
Yeah. Mm.
They get a week off, and it's pretty dead during that week. But there's always blitzes of incentives, promotions, price reductions. Now, the Germans aren't going to participate largely in those price reductions
And the
for the
Americans
rest of
did.
the year. Yeah, the Americans did. And you can talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But this points to probably the Germans still losing sales year over year from 23 to 24.
Oh yeah, without a
Uh,
doubt. Mm.
and so I'm sure they're bracing for it. Our friends at BMW and Beijing, Mercedes and Volkswagen Group, but they still haven't, in my opinion, they still haven't found a bottom. And then you look at Mercedes and BMW over the last couple of weeks, they've announced profit reduction
Warnings.
in their
Yeah.
forecasts, largely because of the Chinese market. So please continue, Lei.
Yeah, I think if you look at this point in time, that 9 product launch on the same day, it's also kind of to beat, the holiday season a bit. That mini matte dash, and 2 of the models that were launched were exactly Tesla killers: the Avatar 07 and the IM LS6. Uh, those were in the 200,000 renminbi range, $30,000. And so it's not surprising to see Tesla continue with that promotion. It could continue until the end of the year.
We'll give them an idea, Lei, of some of the other products that have launched, because you had tweeted there was like 4 vehicles that launched all in the same day.
Yeah, there were 9 vehicles, various vehicles launched or went on pre-sale on September 26th. And this past week, I think it was close to a dozen, starting from Monday. 2 dozen, actually. So I lost count.
So for you non-Americans, I don't think we have a dozen products in the market that we can buy.
Yeah,
so.
well, neither do we have dozen models launching in the same year, right? And that just shows you the kind of the competition currently. And it's
they're not junk models. They're significant models.
Yeah, many of which were reviewed at the Beijing Auto Show, and now they're being launched. Going back to the stimulus measures put out by China, an important number to remind is the 5% GDP growth target. And the thinking is that Q3 GDP growth could be slower than Q2. And hence this meeting came out earlier than usual, the Politburo meeting. And what they discussed and the kind of the headlines that were put out was exactly putting in these measures to ensure that 5% target for the year. That's very important, I think, for Xi.
And this is on the heels of foreign direct investment down, domestic consumption down, and the fact that foreign companies are struggling, the premium brand companies, the consumer premium brand companies, they're all struggling. Starbucks is also kind of sort of struggling. So you're seeing Chinese consumers on the sidelines a bit. Hence, the price war still ongoing.
And that's the kind of weird thing to see. At the same time, these latest and the greatest, you're seeing these order numbers. They look pretty good. Envo, I think they're getting tons of orders. Mona, without exception. So it's a bit to kind of see, is the economy good or bad? But from the EV markets, it looks at all of these new models. They're getting tons of traction.
Well, but you and I know, because we pretty much talk almost daily to friends in China. It's not as hopeful as it was. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we have this break coming up, and then after that, soon it'll be that final mad dash to end the year. I think this week NDRC also posted some numbers, and the one number I remember very clearly was that roughly 2 million of these older clunkers are being taken off the road, and likely the owners of these vehicles are trading in NEVs, trading
Mhm.
for NEVs, and that's 2 million. That's in additional sales. One of the ways to drive consumption. Yeah.
So let's change gears. Congratulations to BYD,
Ah,
who
yeah.
got to 9 million total production units. So and we're talking since they've established themselves as a company. So the number isn't that amazing because obviously Toyota, GM, and Volkswagen Group, they sell 8-9 million units per year, 10 million units per year. It's the fact that they went from 8 million to 9 million in less than 90 days. So congratulations. We have friends at BYD. So um, that's a very, very proud moment during a challenging time outside of China for
Mhm.
the Chinese EV makers. But
And
they also BYD just keeps on breaking records, and it doesn't cease to amaze me that they are continuing their ascendancy to towards trying to dethrone a Volkswagen Group, a Toyota Motor Company, to be the largest automaker in the world. I think it's possible, and within the next few years, it's within grasp. But when you start manufacturing, lay in 9 countries or 8 countries, ship kits or manufacture, the complexity of your supply chain increases significantly. Your balance sheet gets a little more complicated just because of the different currencies that you're dealing with. Operations get more complex because now you're dealing with employees in Europe, employees in Latin America. And so, will they run into challenges? Yes. How they react to those challenges is going to be very telling to see how close they can get to the 9-10 million units in the next several years.
annually, if they can.
Annually. Sorry,
That
annually.
that's hard
Yes.
to fathom. Uh,
Well, so to more context, because you bring up a good point. This year, they're probably going to be around 4 million units. This
most
year alone.
likely closer to
This year
4
alone.
million. Yeah, and all while they're still launching products at a breakneck speed. So earlier this week, the Sea Lion 05 and the Song Pro DMI models. And the way they've approached this is regularly launching these, what do you call them? These dual models
Hmm.
that are priced exactly the same. I mean, you can't really tell the difference between these models. They're both SUV, right? Right.
I think
Uh,
that's the entire point.
and this happens next week. They're launching something else. Uh, while this production records are being broken, and they'll get to 10 million in December. Basically, you can chalk it up, right?
Yeah.
400,000 units a month, roughly, is likely the pace for the remainder of the year. Just crazy to think about. Um,
So, Lay, let's move on to the elephant in the room. Um,
ugh,
the Biden administration this week followed up with what we thought was going to be happening. They've proposed to restrict software from Chinese vehicles connected and intelligent driving for cars, buses, trucks, anything that hits the roads in the U.S. And so which is obviously a preemptive strike because there aren't any Chinese EVs now. In concert with the 100% tariffs, it looks like any doors, any back doors, side doors, front doors into the US market have now been closed. And so that's why you're so disappointed
And
in
the
not being able to
100%
purchase.
EV tariffs go into effect today,
Is that right?
September
Okay.
27th.
Oh,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
why the last couple of days are important on many fronts, right? So that's the 100% EV tariffs out of the way, right? It's been a while, and this software connected vehicle ban is kind of like, how would you
Let
call
me
it?
finish my thought,
Yeah,
Lei. So
sure.
on the software side, the restriction starts for model year 2027.
Yeah, still got a couple of
Now,
years.
you and I know that model year 27 means 2026.
26, yes.
So for so here's a couple things that I'm thinking about. If I'm a foreign legacy automaker that builds or manufactures or ships to the United States, I'm looking at my bill of materials just to make sure up and down the supply chain. It might not be the tier one supplier that's supplying you the component or the module. It might be their supplier or their supplier's supplier that has some sort of software that or that helps the control unit or something like that. I'm getting a little bit wonky, but
Mhm.
so the risk management teams at the legacy automakers, they're all looking at their bombs on their current products. And then if we look at legacy automakers, we're looking at a 5-year product development cycle. So if we're looking at 2027, uh, these guys are already 3 years into development of the vehicles. Okay. So model year 2027 is actually right around the corner. And then model year 2030 is when the hardware restrictions kick in. And
Yeah.
so you had alluded to last week, Lei, Hesai working with one or two Western OEMs.
And so I was saying the 100% EV tariffs or this wall, then this ban on connected vehicles and software is like a kind of like a nail on a coffin, right? Of the China, and this is an interesting thing. It's not only the Chinese companies that are trying to export, uh, or eventually, if they do it, because that statement included production in the U.S. Right? It covers so much, and then going back to that Hesai comment, not only does Chinese companies, automakers, have to find workaround if they can, but it's also the U.S. automakers that are shipping the Buick Envisions, the Lincoln Nautilus, the Polestar 2s and 3s, but Polestar 3s and 4s are being locally produced in the US. So uh, both sides, there will be companies that need to find workarounds. The valuations of the Chinese AV, China AV Inc. looking to IPO, that'll be affected. Companies like Hesai, which is US listed, and they supply these components to AV companies here in the US. They're actually one of the biggest suppliers of lidars for robotaxis in the world. So this covers so much that it's pretty destructive. I think for for many of the Chinese companies, and it it just feels like everything is moving just so much more advanced, faster, out of this realm where in the US we're in this little bubble, a protectionistic bubble that trying to uh you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, I do. So let me pick up where you're leaving off. So it's a gift. to the D3. It's a huge gift. What are they going to do with it? Number one. And I wouldn't call the revised strategy a workaround. They're going to have to find new sources for
Right.
these components, this software. So we had talked about, or I had talked about in newsletters way back when, about this bifurcation. One set of bill of materials for the China market, one for the rest of the world. And so if I'm a Chinese EV maker and I want to build locally, now I'm going to have to source locally because, and this is what Tesla did in China. 90% of their suppliers are Chinese in China for the Shanghai Gigafactory models that are built there. But this creates opportunity for startups in the United States, if we're looking at this. But what's a little bit schizophrenic, and I mentioned this in an interview in CNBC 2 nights ago or last night, is Trump might come in if he gets elected and blow everything up. And
Yeah.
I think because this is probably the last thing that the Biden administration is going to be able to roll out before he leaves office. Okay, because there will be a new president because he's not running. It's either going to be Kamala or Trump. Let's say Kamala continues to enforce the Biden administration's policies, but she might also look at things a bit more practically, because if they build in the United States, that does mean jobs for Americans. Okay, so that's significant. And Trump has effectively said, you can build locally.
Well, Trump is pretty clear of not allowing the Mexico route. Right, everything. The John Deere, right, was recently a hot topic of 200% tariffs. Everything coming in from Mexico. So that rule that's why BYD is on hold. That's why Tesla's Giga Mexico is on hold. And even if you do produce, then this ban says it applies to vehicles produced in the U.S. Then you have to work with the suppliers. Can you do that?
But that's why it's so schizophrenic, Lei, because what if Trump says, I want to keep this Biden policy, the 100% tariffs. He'll probably keep those. He might even ratchet it up. To me, that's more symbolic, because 100% is probably enough to scare most Chinese EV makers off.
Mm-hmm.
And most of those EV makers probably can't afford to build in Mexico anyways, right? There's probably only 10 or 12 Chinese EV companies that have the ambition or the capital, okay? Won't say or, ambition and capital to actually build in a Mexico or a Europe.
Yeah, and speaking of Europe, so right now China is fighting two battles, right, in this tariff dispute, one in the US, one in EU, and China has just launched the anti-discrimination dispute with Canada, because for Canada it's pretty much purely there's no plausible reason other than we're just going to follow the US, right, and do the same thing. And then the EU, right, intense discussions over the past weeks, and something that could come out was a voluntary minimum pricing that are being put on the table. Whether that's going to happen, we don't know. And at the same time, right, look at Stellantis. They just recently put out 2 news releases. Leapmotor is launching, starting from Italy. They put a launch event in Italy, launching to 350 sales points in Europe, globally, by the end of this year, I guess. And then the Paris Motor Show, right? Leapmotor is front and center of Stellantis, while this EU tariff is going to go into voting in a matter of days.
And just to be clear, Germany and Spain on one side that want free trade, and France, Italy on the other side.
Yeah.
So let me piggyback off of that. Let's say they find a compromise on the EU tariffs. If the EU decides and the UK decides that they want to follow suit with the United States and restrict software, because one thing that was for sure when I was in London over the summer was what are we going to do when these cars are gathering our data? Okay. And so that's an issue amongst the UK government as well. And you had made a great point about the Chinese EV makers battling multiple fronts. So they could get a win on the tariff side in the EU, or at least dial down some of the tariffs are going to stay. How much from a percentage standpoint is still up for debate, but I don't really see that dialing down that much.
I agree.
But except for maybe SAIC, maybe some of the ones that got the 40% tariff, maybe they'll get thrown a bone and that'll get reduced a little bit. But generally speaking, I think the tariffs are going to stay in place. And then on top of that, if the EU looks at the issue the same way the United States does, that's another headache for the Chinese EV makers.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I think the EV tariffs, they're just a matter of increasing prices of your cars and whether you want to sell at all. Whereas the ban on connected vehicles is just so much more destructive because of the way it's stated. And I mean, it's not only vehicles, but components. Right? That's the
well, and it's a slippery slope because right now it's passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles that drive on roads in the United States, but scooters, the mopeds, they all ride on roads in the United States, so it's unclear. And then charging infrastructure, most of the chargers that are built, or most of the chargers that are sold, I won't say most, a good percentage of the chargers that are being installed in the United States, they're Chinese, they're manufactured in China. And one of the ones that you and I have spoken with, or you have spoken with more than I have, Autel, is a Chinese, X-Charge. They're using Chinese technology. So, where's the off ramp? I don't know where the off ramp is, and this. So the D3, with the exception of Stellantis with Leap Motor now, they aren't doing that well in China. So if they want to try to build back up their business in China, this is probably not going to help them do it.
Yeah.
The most vulnerable to me is Tesla, because FSD is still out there, and this probably downgrades the FSD is launched in any full form. It might be limited, and the features might not be the same as the rest of the world, but this is probably one of the reasons Elon wants Trump in. So,
yeah, and speaking of Tesla, we're inclined to kind of think the type of retaliatory measures China could put out. And the first company you think of is Tesla, because there's so much success in China. But at the same time, it's not easy as saying we're just going to retaliate using Tesla as some sort of because of the local economy, because of the local.
That's the last thing the Shanghai government wants. That's the last thing.
Exactly. It's delicate matter. And it's not simply as saying we're going to do something to Tesla, right? It could be on the dairy products coming out of Europe,
that's
right.
That's the thing. So it might not be automotive for automotive.
yeah. So and the China is pretty. I think in their Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they put out uh, a statement saying, we're going to look at this and we have the certain action that we're ready to take. Uh, so, uh, you know,
This puts so much pressure on a certain number of Chinese EV brands that are struggling to sell in China that were hopeful to sell elsewhere outside of China. And now, anytime you, let me finish this thought, Lei. Anytime you take out the second largest region market, and I'm talking European Union, and then the third, um, or the second is the United States, sorry, and then third is the EU. All this volume that you had forecast going to, at least to Europe, because I think they had a much better idea that the United States was going to be much more difficult to enter. Um, Now, what do you do with it? Because now a half dozen countries need to make up for that volume potentially. So, um, in we've seen from January to August, exports have increased by 25%. Of that, I think there were 4 million units. 1.3 million of them were NEVs, and the biggest exporter was, I forget now. Anyways, I'll
it's
figure that
either
out.
Cherry or SAIC. Everything, not only NEVs. So
Hmm.
yeah, no,
So,
yeah. Well, I was gonna say that going back to the EU, US, I think the China EV Inc. The expectation is that they will be content with the current wall or this, uh, I said death sentence, if you will, that the US has put up or thrown out. I think they'll be content, but in Europe, the expectations will also be that they know that the current tariff rates will not change much, but at the same time, they can find ways to enter Europe. They will find ways.
well, there's
More
dialogue.
promising. Yeah,
I think that's the most important thing. There's dialogue,
yeah. There's not a lot, but
and
yeah,
we can't put BYD in the same bucket as the rest of the Chinese EV makers because they're much farther along on their globalization strategy,
sure,
manufacturing
sure,
footprint,
sure.
and I think Mexico is just a huge part of that strategy. Whether effectively any capacity they add in Mexico eventually ends up in North America or the rest of Latin America is is something that they have the flexibility to do. But we know that they say that they're not looking at the U.S. market, but of course they are.
Yeah. So I think the Paris
So,
Motor Show will be an interesting point in time. I think that comes right before that vote um,
hello.
takes place,
Oh.
and the action is pretty significant. XPeng, BYD, Leapmotor, GAC Group, Ito. I think Ito they're showing their full series of products in Paris.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, and Stellantis.
Voya, I think, is going to be there.
Yeah.
Our
Uh,
friend Daniel Kirchich is going to be there.
yeah.
Um, and you and I are going.
Yes.
So, for you listeners, I don't know. Maybe you and I need to have one of those happy hours again. Um, I don't know Paris that well, so if you have, if the viewers or listeners has a suggestion of where we should host a happy hour, please put it in the chat or send us direct messages because we'd love to see anyone who's been following us. So,
Yeah.
oh man, hey, I don't. Let me look and see here. I don't really have.
And then the other thing is the Tesla dropped the robotaxi event poster. We Robot. And they've been showing some latest and the greatest of their FSD, actually smart summon, these type of things, and interesting. What they're going to
Elon
show.
is doing everything in his power to keep that Tesla valuation high.
Yeah,
And this, as Uber announces a partnership with WeRide,
we ride
with, last week or 2 weeks ago, Waymo, excuse
BYD.
me, and
Yeah,
they already had a partnership with Cruise.
yeah.
So I think Uber is trying to be the picks and shovel people. Regardless of who the robotaxi company is, you can
The,
use the Uber app.
and the other news that we missed last week was the Waymo and Hyundai utilizing that Motional asset for robotaxis, and there were some talks of that Zeekr partnership may be in jeopardy.
No announcement has been
Right. No.
made between Zeekr or Waymo, but
And the thing is, that partnership is the vehicle is engineered in Sweden, and the LiDAR, the sensor and hardware stack will be installed by Waymo in the US once that vehicle reaches US. Now, will that type of setup be affected by the connected vehicle ban? Is not clear.
so
But
Waymo developed their own LiDAR. So
yeah,
they're not buying from someone else.
right.
So I
Right.
think
So
that helps.
only the vehicle, only the body of that Zeekr Envision will be
And
shipped
you
to the
could
US.
see Waymo having more than one form factor on the robotaxi, because a one size fits all robotaxi that's pretty large for the US market might not make sense
Yeah.
in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
So maybe what they do is, again, bifurcation, have Zeekr help them build for Europe or Asia, and then Hyundai help them build for the US market or North America.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's all I have, man. I'm looking at my newsletter, and
Well,
well, you had mentioned that, or I'd mentioned in my newsletter that one company, BAIC, is actually cutting capacity from 320,000 units to 120,000 units. So that's a new one that we don't hear about very often.
and Volkswagen SAIC rumored to cut the Nanjing plant. And this week, right? I think on Wednesday, Volkswagen was having this meeting at this castle in Germany, and there was talk of a 7% raise in salaries, which the board said no, that's not going to happen. So we're continuing to have this this battle, internal battle between the IG Metals, the Works Council, and the board member,
and I have to constantly remind folks of how serious this is by telling them that, reminding them that when there was Dieselgate, when they paid out billions of dollars, I think $8, $9, $10 billion, they never closed a factory. So if they go to the union, the worker union, and say we can't guarantee jobs anymore, that should tell you the level of seriousness or dire straits that they're potentially looking at.
Yeah, and one of those dire straits and potential things happening is a strike by the end of the year.
That's happening right now in the United States, I think so, or they're talking about it. The UAW is striking some component plants.
Yeah,
Tavares is not very popular right now in the US.
Yeah, he's on the kind of what do you call it, the chopping block or something. I mean, they
he's
already
out.
Talked about
he's out anyways.
Well, no. I mean, they talked about the succession plan with the
Mhm.
possibility of him remaining, but I think the U.S. and North America business has not been well for Stellantis the last few months and quarters. So
with his
Yeah.
with the U.S. With the North America market being about 30% of their profits.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyways, let's open this up for comments or questions, if nothing else. So, really quickly, if you have any comments or questions, just put them in the chat. If not, we can end this early. But did you see my Detroit Tigers, Lay? They're about to make the playoffs, baby.
Something to
Detroit's
cheer
pretty
about.
excited. Next week in Michigan, there's Michigan Tech Week. I'm going to be a big part of that. The following week is the Battery Show.
Yeah.
And then the week after that, you and I are off
You-
to Paris.
Yeah. There's so much more activities in your neck of woods. Here it's just in the
Yeah.
countryside.
So for those of you that are attending the Battery Show, I'm sitting on a panel for that. And then the Reuters Automotive
Oh
Roundtable.
yeah, they have one. Yeah.
And then Facita, which is a advocacy group for the automotive space. They're hosting their Detroit conference at the Tech Center, and I'll be a part of that too. So I'll have a busy last quarter. You will have a busy last quarter, and so we're going to dial in this video, and I'd like to think that we could still do it, even when we're all over the place. Maybe we can have one of those live shows. I'll bring a nice camera, and we could just do a live show in Paris.
Yeah, that would be great. I think.
So, anyways, I'm good, man. I
guess
don't have
we
anything
can call
else.
it a day.
Yeah, no comments, no questions. So, all right. Hey, everyone, thanks for joining and appreciate your flexibility with being a little bit earlier than normal. Have a good weekend, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So,
Okay, I guess
Lay.
stop recording.
So don't shut the window.